Welcome to Feedback for Continuous Improvement in the Classroom, Linking Equity and Excellence. Today, I have the wonderful opportunity to talk with you a little bit about feedback, and I'm going to be interviewed and hosted by my good friend, Dr. Carrie Holmberg, who is also a co-author of much of the work that I'm going to present today. It's important that we let you know something about feedback, and we do it as quickly as we can because we know everyone is busy these days. I want to start by thanking our global education allies. We are glad to be working with you all and serving as best we can to help you get excited about something we've been thinking about for many, many years, and that is feedback. So welcome all, and I hope this helps you to get started on your journey with thinking through feedback more deeply.
So we're going to have 5 questions in 5 minutes.
That's going to be really fast. Do you think I can do it, Carrie?
Completely. So Brent, who are you and what got you interested in feedback?
Well, I have to say, it started with a very global experience. I began my teaching career in a small town in southern Hungary in Central Eastern Europe in 1989. And in that school, I had a chance to live out my dreams of what it was like to become a beginning teacher, someone who really was engaged both in learning and working with kids to get excited about learning. That journey then continued all the way back to the United States, where I worked in East Harlem at a small public high school called Central Park East Secondary School. Both of those places really excited me, not just about what I was teaching or how I was teaching it, but what the kids were doing with the work that we were presenting to them. And feedback in the early years of my career played a central part in learning how to be more effective with my students. One of the nice things about what I've been doing over the last decade is I took a lot of those lessons from teaching high school, and I was able to bring them straight into a teacher education preparation program at San Jose State University. So over the last decade and a half, we've been working with pre-service teachers and university supervisors and cooperating teachers in the field just to get a feel for how to bring assessment to life and make it something that isn't done to students, but rather that students invite themselves to do with us. We've had an opportunity to work with about 8 different subject area teachers, and we've learned a lot over the years, haven't we, Carrie, about what really matters when it comes to feedback for equity and excellence. One of those things that came out of the journey were 2 books. And again, I stand here with Carrie today to talk a little bit about feedback for continuous improvement in the classroom in our latest book from Corwin in 2023. But I invite all of you to take a look at our previous book with ASCD in 2017, where we really laid out the groundwork for thinking about how to become more effective in helping students and ourselves to ask good questions, to pause and think a little bit together about what we want to know, and to find out how to elaborate and go deeper with all of the explorations we do in our classrooms, both in and outside of the school.
So what do we know about feedback and its effects on learning?
Well, Carrie, we definitely know that over 30 years of studies on the effects of formative feedback in particular have proven to us that there is a learning gain associated with those schools and those classrooms that engage in deep formative feedback. Studies of studies point to the power of feedback, going all the way back to the work of John Hattie in Australia and New Zealand. And many of those same effects have been shown to be true for different parts of the globe, including Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. There are really good reasons, it turns out, to trust our intuitions about what works. And we have research to back it up, but more importantly, we just have personal experience. Talking with students on a project and engaging them and giving them information and having them give us information about where they currently are in the stream of learning turns out to be a really powerful way to improve achievement.
Can you say a little more about the features of feedback that works for kids?
I think we can, because one of the nice things is that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. People have been doing this work for over 30 years, and we know some basic things about what makes feedback formative. First of all, it always starts with the positive. We always want to start with an assets model with our students, giving them an opportunity to hear from us that something good is going on with the current draft of the work they're doing. When we do engage and talk with our students about their work, We always want to be using some kind of specific, non-judgmental language to indicate areas for improvement. It's very important that we be specific about a small number of areas rather than overwhelm students with either things like general praise or even some form of what we might think of as constructive criticism. These generalist approaches don't generally help students get started, but very specific, targeted ideas about what's next provides opportunities for revision. And the key concept in any formative feedback session with our students is, what's the opportunity to take what we currently are doing and move it a little forward into the next realm of the process of creating knowledge? What that means is that the real sweet spot for formative feedback is going to be right in the place where things are formative, that is, they're opening opportunities to learn, and at the same time, they're giving concrete scaffolded next steps that help students to know, what do we think is the next step in the classroom to move towards the final project or final assignment or even final preparation for something that we consider to be traditionally a more traditional form of assessment? Feedback is always about engaging kids. So we want to leave you with a couple of ideas in the 5 for 5 framework here. You want to always engage the kids in what we're going to call first drafts, whether they are on the field playing a particular sport and learning a skill, whether they are in the art classroom, whether they are in a music setting, whether they are in a science lab, whether they are in a history poster project, whatever they're doing, we're always talking about the first draft with them. And what is it going to take to move everyone forward? One way to do that is to think about feedback as a shared project. It always involves some idea about setting a purpose, agreeing on some goals, developing drafts, or what we're calling first and second and third drafts, even if technically it's not an English language arts class. And then we move forward with them on how can we prepare ourselves to be ready to say, now we can evaluate this final project.
So, Brent, what do you think is most helpful about our new formative feedback framework, which we see here, was helpful for teachers who are looking at their own feedback practices?
I think the biggest idea in this graphic is pick one idea and go after it and play with it and learn from it and think about it. For example, if you're pretty good at giving verbal feedback and you've been doing it for a while, you might want to start to think about something we call nonverbal feedback under the modalities configuration and directionality focal points. You have different focal points that you can look at to say, I want to improve and play with my practice a bit. But if we just took, for example, modalities, you might say, okay, I'm pretty good at the spoken, but I'd like to be working more on the nonverbal. And one of the nice things about our book and this framework is you can take any one of these starting points and you can dive into a chapter and get ideas now about where to go forward in a way that doesn't overwhelm you. There's no need to read the whole book. There's a need to grab onto a piece that's useful and put it to action and practice for you and your students as soon as you can.
It does seem like a lot, though, Brent. So how does one get started with kids diving deeper into feedback for learning, say, on Monday morning?
Well, I'm going to say start with good old chapter 4, because I think one thing we all want our students to be doing a little bit more of is self-assessment. We really want to see our students be able to take their assets, their skills, and their particular goals and push them forward in their own lives. And so we want to give students the power to what we call self-assess. So one thing you could be thinking about right away is, hey, I think I better take a look at that old self-assessment chapter and get a feeling for what I could do on Monday morning. Are there particular moves or protocols or even guided approaches that I could use? And I know in that chapter, we spent a lot of time figuring out how to write those up. One thing, again, I would say is, even if you're not sure on Monday morning what to do, at least in a group with the Alliance, you can begin to play a little bit with, well, how are we doing with directionality? What do we think about when we think about teacher-driven or peer-to-peer driven or self-driven feedback? What does that mean for us as a collective? Do we actually care about students engaging their own learning by being more aware and self-reflective? And how are we making that happen for everybody? Again, configurations is another thing that I know is very familiar to the group. People are quite good, I'm sure, at figuring out how to give whole class feedback, and small group feedback, and even individualized one-on-one. So there are many ways to think about what to do on Monday morning, but maybe we need to be also thinking about what do we want to see over the course of a semester or a year in our particular setting as we improve and grow in our own teaching and learning practice. Again, we put a little bit of emphasis on modality here in the 5 to 5 talk because it turns out nonverbal communication is a very, very important piece. It matters how we approach students, our position, the way in which we communicate with them. Cross-culturally, this matters a whole lot. It turns out in the research that we've done that it's not just the case that the kinds of norms that we take for granted, perhaps in North America, could be shared by every other culture. And therefore, nonverbal is an important way to think about our feedback. We want to be cross-culturally sensitive and more aware of the way in which we position ourselves in our learning environments. So that's a great place to start as well. Key thing here is building the conditions for dialogue and trust and resilience. And we talked quite a bit about that. Trust is at the center of taking good formative feedback as well as giving it. So building a learning community in which dialogue is possible and people feel trustful will also help the resilience that's needed to keep plowing forward, particularly when you're talking to students about, let's make some improvements tomorrow or next week, and let's not give up because there's no reason to give up. We've got all the good resources we need to go to the next level. Feedback also in this particular framework centers us. And so one of the things we think about is even if we don't go through every little node and point of argument or discussion or even vision that we have, at least we can think more about communicating, engaging, and focusing our students. And so even if our students could see this kind of a diagram or have a visualization in a poster when they start a project, or know what the cycle will look like of the learning event and the assessment points that will go along with it, that will help our students at least to know, where am I now, where am I going, and how am I going to get there? Monday morning is always the problem, but it's also the incredible opportunity. And we use that as a metaphor because maybe some of you are teaching on a Saturday. We don't even know if you're going to have a traditional Monday through Friday schedule. Maybe you're on a block schedule. Maybe you're finding opportunities to work with students in ways that are much more flexible online than we would have thought about years ago. All we can say is this. One thing that's really helpful is to start planning. And so we put emphasis in every chapter in the book on planning, what to consider and why it matters, to build that into your lessons, to build that into your units, to build that into your overall big picture backward design ideas for your particular curriculum. We also give, as you see here, very clear scaffolds and guided practice for individual teachers. So there's a sort of a way that we flow this book that allows you to grab where you want to go and play. Deep dives, it's all about self-assessment for yourself as well. And so we want to give you opportunities to reflect on your own practice, and we've tried to build that in. And maybe one of the more exciting things, Carrie, that we've been doing the last couple of years here is learning about video and how video can help to instruct and share new ideas. So we embedded with QR codes into the book some very practical, straightforward ways of seeing formative feedback at work in different configurations and different modalities, and getting a sense of what it looks like for the kinds of kids we serve, which truly deeply are always embedded in a sort of framework for what we call equity. Have I covered it all? Maybe not in 5 minutes. We're pretty close.
It's fantastic, Brent. I appreciate these insights.
All right. Let us know what interests you. Keep connected.